Hello everybody, welcome to our B2B webinar today. We're all here in sunny Melbourne. Well, not all of us are here in sunny Melbourne. We've got one of our guests up in Sydney and the other two panellist guests in Melbourne. So let me introduce myself. My name is Andrew Hausiger. I'm from Green Hat. Today we are talking about content marketing, and in particular we are talking about the next phase of content marketing in the B2B world, which is really about conversion strategies and how we are going to use our content to drive further conversion for B2B marketers. So the format for the discussion today is I'll set the scene with a couple of a little bit of research around content marketing, what we're seeing in B2B, and also some reference to how we can capitalise and drive some ROI around our content efforts. So let me kick it off by just introducing our panel. Firstly, let me introduce Craig Mills. So Craig's from IBM. Thanks very much for joining us today, Craig. Been there 15 years. Craig is in charge of the marketing analytics function for IBM across Asia Pacific and reports into New York, so a very busy guy. The second panelist we've got is Phil Brown. So Phil Brown is senior content marketing manager and social media marketing manager at ADMA. So just as Craig has got a very important job, so has Phil, given that the Association for Data-Driven Marketing and Advertising in Australia is an organisation that is providing a lot of information and education to B2B marketers and B2C marketers in Australia. So content and social media is a really critical part. And our third panellist today is Ben Wild. So Ben is the head of digital strategy at Green Hat, advising global clients such as Schneider Electric, Dell, Mercer and others, as well as local Australian organisations. So without further ado, let me just jump into the discussion points today. We'll be talking about the art of effective B2B content marketing, how to set up conversion pathways for buyers, how to measure and what to measure and what conversions to expect, and actual experience and examples of content-led conversion. So before we get into that, let's just set the scene and look at the situation that I think we as B2B marketers find ourselves in today. Firstly, the landscape in B2B marketing has changed considerably, fundamentally due to the internet and digital, to the point that now marketing and marketers need to behave in quite a different way to what they did a while ago. Many analysts, including Forrester, talk to us about the buyer's journey and the amount of time that the buyer spends in the journey before they need to engage the seller. So in this particular graph here, Forrester talk about the buyer potentially taking up to 90% of their time in their buying process before engaging the seller. It doesn't really matter what the percentage is, and various consultants talk about and analysts talk about different percentages, but we know it's going in one direction. And that is buyers are becoming more empowered. So this is probably the one fundamental thing that has changed the landscape for us as B2B marketers. How do we market now in this environment where a buyer is fueled up with so much information around their options? Second point I'd like to raise is comes from some research that we have done with that we do annually actually with ADMA, the B2B Marketing Outlook Report. And over the last couple of years, we've asked the question around inbound marketing, and we're interested to know what percentage of budget marketers intend to allocate towards inbound over outbound activity. What this graph shows is that this year marketers had planned to spend 41%, or 41% planned to spend more on inbound activities than outbound activities, as opposed to 25% who said, I'll be spending more on outbound activities versus inbound activities. And this aligns very much with the last point about the change in the balance of power with respect to the buyer and the buyer's journey. Another interesting point that's come out of the research at the start of this year is around personas. And the correlation we draw between content and personas is that as organisations are spending more money on developing content, then we would expect they have a greater understanding of their audience. However, when we asked the question around development of personas at the start of this year, only 43% said that they were actually developing personas, and buyer profiles for their audience. So it begs the question that if only 43% understand that, 57% aren't quite sure, and how are they actually building out their content for an audience they're not fully conversant with. So it's I think a point to consider when you're moving into your content marketing. We'll talk a bit about that with the panel when we get into it. Last week, the Content Marketing Institute released its 2016 B2B Content Marketing Benchmarks Report. So they're well ahead of the game. That's good work. And one of the things that they talked about there are the most important metrics that B2B marketers use when they are investing inside or within content marketing. And this is quite an interesting graph because the first couple of points seem to make sense when we're saying, that they're investing because they want to drive up lead quality. Sales at 23% or so, they want to drive up sales revenue. They want to drive up higher conversion rates with better quality content as well. But what I also found interesting is that the bottom three were metrics that not so long ago, and maybe still today, are focused on by many B2B marketers, such as where I rank on SEO, how many subscribers that I have opted in, and also how many website visits that I have. So I think if you're an organisation that's focused on visits to your website and subscriber growth, then you probably need to be having a think about some other metrics that are going to be important from an ROI point of view moving forward. And I think the final point that I want to make as far as setting the scene is talking about a key issue that we're talking about today is about content and how do we use it for conversion and converting leads. So a key question you've got to ask is converting what from what or what to what. What is the overall objective here? And if at the end of the day we're talking about marketing helping growing revenue, we need to have laid out what our lead stages. And so where does content fit into that? We start to think about content across the buying process. And in simple terms, we might talk about early stage content, mid stage content, and late stage content. And so we'd encourage you to think about your content in these areas. Early stage may be along the lines of thought leadership, insights, your point of view. Mid stage may be along the lines of positioning your solution, how you can help once you've identified people who have the issue. And late stage needs to be how you can actually activate the buyer, the online buyer in particular. So the acceptance of some offers, be it an assessment or a calculator, whatever is going to be suitable for your audience. But the first question we've got here is to do with types of content. And I'll prep you up, Phil, to say I'm going to be flicking this one across to you. And the question is, what type of content should you build in the first instance when you want to drive, and if you're interested in driving lead conversion? So, Phil, I will hand that over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Look, I'd suggest that the easy way to sum that up is with buy now and sell later. So really in the early stages, you're looking to buy credibility. You're looking to buy authority from your potential customers, and you're doing that through rich, relevant content. So you're looking to content that's going to cut through the white noises that's out there, and you're looking to content that's relevant to your potential customers. But it's that credibility and authority that's really going to position your brand as thought leaders in those early stages. I'd also suggest, when you're looking at the types of content, that visual over the written word is probably the way to go. This isn't a hard and fast rule. It does depend on your organisation and what you're trying to achieve with your goals. But I'd suggest visual first and then written later. And I'd be thinking you're looking to either entertain, inform, or educate your audience. So early on, you want to catch their attention. It's all about hooking them in. They're connecting with your brand. They're connecting with your content pillars or your brand story. And then later down that customer journey, you're then providing solution-based content to them and hopefully converting.
I'm going to actually ask Craig if he can give us his view on that as well. I know we've had a few discussions, Craig. Over here.
Yeah, thanks. What we're finding at IBM is that we have aligned our content to the buying stages of our clients out there. And one of the things that we are fortunate with IBM is we've got a fairly reputable brand, so we tend not to have to worry too much about the credibility piece at first, although we do need to do that in certain areas. That's because we focused on a lot of discover and learn. And our buying stages we work to are discover, learn, try, and buy. We found that much of the content we've developed in the past has been in the early phases, and that's been good because it's done exactly what Phil's mentioned, which is build a credibility. The gap we have at the moment, and we're working on this, is in the try-buy stage. How do we then take that credibility and then push people and work people through to the try and buy stage? And it's that try-buy content which is now critical for us. Now, we've put a series of measures in place. And Andrew talked about that before, some specific measures to try and push our organisation to further that journey for us. We saw at the beginning that we had sort of 80-20 at the moment, 80 in the learn and discover and 20 in the try-buy. We're trying to re-engineer that at the moment. It's a big effort across the organisation, but in pushing further try-buy content, we can see more upside in the conversion, because the essential part about try-buy is you want to give an experiential view of your offering that you're trying to sell. And if that content is experiential, it can help people understand what it is they're truly getting in for and then have a higher conversion rate. And we're seeing 3 to 4 times conversion rates on try-buy as we do on discover and learn, and that just makes logical sense.
Great, thank you. That's very interesting. And I guess as vendors, we have to be careful about over-educating the audience, and got to keep the focus on also, progressing the audience through with relevant content. So that's highly relevant. Thank you. I'm going to ask Ben if we're talking then about measurement. So the question around, how do you then measure the impact and the effectiveness of your content, particularly if you're looking across, a number of these different stages. Thanks, Ben.
When I talk about measurement, and especially from a content perspective, the first things I kind of want to look at are, I guess, the primary based metrics. And when I talk primary, I sort of think, well, what are the consumption metrics? Say, page views, unique visitors, things like that. We move into stuff like retention metrics, so return rates and bounce rates. We also want to track things like the sharing metrics, so things like likes and forwards and shares of the content. We then sort of always want to know about the engagement. It's a pretty important piece. So how long are people spending on that page? So how long are they actually spending with that content? So are they actually consuming it, or are they just bouncing straight out? And then finally, we sort of want to check through some conversion metrics. And that's obviously about, form fills and downloads and what part of the funnel are actually consumers actually at. But ultimately, for me, I think there's sort of 6 core principles that I think people need to measure their content by. And the first one is that optimization factor. So when you've got your benchmark metrics, which I mentioned above, you've really got to start looking at, how do I optimize those on a day-to-day, on a piece-by-piece basis? So you've actually got to take those metrics that we talked about and then actually optimize them. The next thing I'd like to push push the content boundary is into things like brand innovation and brand health. So whether user-generated content or through engaging with your customers per se can actually help drive the brand innovation or actually put you in a better perception with your customers. Content is a fundamental piece for that, so you want to measure your content against that. I like to go into things like operational efficiency. So, it costs a lot to actually service and engage customers. So if you can look at a way that your content can actually take a bit of cost out of the business, an example being that a launch of a new software might actually see the call center rates go up by 70 or 80%, all for one question. So if you can actually build a content piece around that can actually take away that call center cost, then it's actually driving better business results. Customer experience is a key part of this. You've got to make sure that you're defining your customer experience and actually making sure your content is fulfilling that. And then last of all, look, ultimately it comes down to revenue generation. So your content has to actually help drive real revenue, either via dropping the cost to serve or cost to sell, or actually increasing the revenue streams within the business. And a fundamental piece of that is ensuring that we can actually measure your content into the funnel, into a CRM, and tracking that as an ROI.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Clearly, there's a lot of things that could be measured in the world of digital and content marketing. So I know that a little bit further on, you're going to talk about what some of those metrics might be. So let's move on to. We want to make this as sort of practical as we can, and talk about some things that some takeaways that as B2B marketers you can actually go away and and start acting on immediately. And one of them is about gating your content. It's often talked about what content should you gate and when, given that you're trying to turn your audience from anonymous to known and further engage them. So I'm going to flick this one over to Craig to see what you think about that, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. On gating, we've really seen some changes on our approach to gating in the last few months at IBM. In particular, it's drawn from some research that we've been doing internally and based on our metrics. A lot of our gated material, of course, people are bouncing off. People don't like filling in forms unless they necessarily get some value exchange. So we saw somewhere, up to 80% of people walking away from content before they'd even downloaded it because we got a gate on it. Now, in the early stages of discover and try, that obviously goes against the objectives that we have. So what we've decided to do now, and are working through this across the organisation, is to begin to ungate material in the lower ends of the buying cycle, in the discover phase particularly. You put selective gates on the on the learn, and then obviously we want to put more and more gates on the try and the buy activity, because that's where we want to capture information and then correspond and work directly with those prospects. So what we're now instituting is a variable gating strategy to do just that. In effect, letting go of the content that has lesser value and then putting serious gates around the content that has higher value. And this value exchange is critical to our overall strategy. So what that means is we're able to get further reach in our discover phase because more people will access the content, let them have it for free. But then when we get to that value exchange where people are willing and wanting to engage with us directly, that's where we capture the information. And indeed, it's essential to our brand because we want to be seen as important and also essential to our clients. Therefore, they will be willing to give us that information. And we do that in the right way, trust it, that we don't abuse that information. And then, of course, that becomes an essential part to conversion because then we're able to convert those higher quality responses and leads into ultimately win revenue for us. I'll pass you back, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. That's thanks very much. So, Phil, if that's the there has to be a gating policy in place, then the next part to the question is, what sort of contact data should I be collecting? And we've got to think about how much the visitor lead prospect is prepared to give in a value exchange. So, what's your view as to how this should work?
Thanks, Andrew. Look, don't ask for everything at once. You need to think about this as dating your potential customers. So if, as we've often seen in the digital space, and I'll go to engage with content and all of a sudden I have a huge array of data they're asking me for before I've even seen any content, and I think Craig from IBM had just said that they're seeing 80% dropout rates at that point, you need to be really gentle. And it's back to more traditional sales techniques where you're asking those questions as you learn more and more about your customer or your potential customer. So the very first touch point, it may be as simple as just an email address or an email address and a name. And then as that person moves through the customer journey, as that person is touching different pieces of content, then you can be asking them additional questions and building up that profile or building up that persona that you mentioned earlier. And by the time they get to that 90% stage of the customer journey, their customer decision, you know a lot about them, and the sales team can really, really be effective at that point.
So we're running these gating policies and we're collecting data, and hopefully we're doing some progressive profiling. Raises the question, around technically how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this as well? So it brings up the marketing automation, the marketing automation question. So what I'd like to do, Ben, is I'd be interested in your view. If we ask the question, do we really need marketing automation in order to run this sort of content and conversion program?
I think you touched on it earlier that if we're seeing that 9 out of 10 people are starting their buying journey online, and the more move to actually get through the buying cycle online, you must have an online presence in order to actually capture that kind of cycle. And the problems or the challenges that I guess that I'd like to see here are, how do we actually track and identify these anonymous viewers to your website? How do you actually then link the digital history of this anonymous user to a system? How do I know if someone is actually qualified or is justified in actually making a call from sales? And then I guess a big part of it is, how do we actually convert them from an anonymous person to a known person? The marketing automation software of today can actually help solve most of these problems. So it does this in probably 4 fundamental ways, and it does it via primarily putting digital tracking on anyone that comes through any of your web channels. Does it via cookies, does it via reverse IP lookup. So basically you can capture and store information of that user, keep it in even if they're anonymous, and then eventually, hopefully, once we've converted them into a known audience member, it actually then pushes that history onto that user there. So we actually have a known buyer journey, user experience with that person. We then sort of, with automation, put people through a scoring model. And what the scoring model does is it actually allows you to put value on certain pieces of information or certain assets within your digital channels. And the aim through the scoring process is to actually move people through a funnel. You assign more points to more valuable assets, especially late stage assets. If people are actually engaging with some of the ready to buy sort of stuff, you want to actually make sure they're scoring points to push them across into the next the funnel stage. A key component is nurturing for automation, but the key part of nurturing is it allows you to automate this early, mid, and late stage content that Andrew referred to earlier. So it actually allows you to sit back and have a 24-hour machine working for you, as opposed to having to have a team of marketers out there. The system can transfer these leads to the sales team. And ultimately, probably the key component of the automation system is that most of them have built-in analytics. So it actually allows you to track and have a closed-loop reporting that actually can then link in with your CRM and actually get back to the proper ROI. So after all that, Andrew, I'd say yes, it's a no-brainer. I think marketing automation is a key component of today's digital marketer.
Good on you. Thanks. Yeah, well, that's a good answer, and it also raises the discussion around how does the sales organisation start to see the interaction with the target audience with the content that you're providing as well. Okay, let's just bring up the question about other people in the organisation. I mean, really, does content is it all the responsibility of the marketer? And I want to push this question across over to Phil. So the question is, what is the role of the sales team in the content and conversion marketing process.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, the sales team are absolutely crucial. I mean, they're right at the pointy end. They are the ones that have to ensure the conversion. But I'm going to go bigger picture than that and say that we're all content marketers now. And as we're seeing digital marketing budgets have risen substantially, I think this year and the next year you're going to see content marketing budgets certainly rising as well. The content marketing needs to become ubiquitous across the organisation. And as you're using those metrics, the KPIs, the return on investment, it's really about being able to prove to the executive that there's success in the program and trying to grow it. So the sales team and the marketing team really, really, more than ever, need to be aligned, and the marketing team need to be thinking about that customer journey, the content journey, if you will, with that sales goal at the end. And then the sales team become a crucial part of that journey, and they may be or should be content creators and content curators as well to ensure you're getting those conversions at the end.
Yeah, Phil, I'll just take it on from there and talk practically about something that's happening to us at IBM, where we're not just looking at the sales team, we're also looking at our product developers getting involved in the development as well. So content becomes a responsibility of everybody, and we have software developers, we have product developers, we have services developers, everybody getting in on the act, and the ability to then orchestrate our organisation to bring that content to bear becomes critical, particularly again around those try-buy offers. Generally speaking, if we're able to get our organisation to pull together the best of our content into what's available in the organisation and make it publicly available, usually digitally, then we can see a much more significant uplift in our revenue. And that's a push we're all trying to do at the moment at IBM. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Okay, so I know we get asked this question a lot with regard to benchmarks. And what are the relevant benchmarks for B2B lead conversion using content? So, Ben, I might flick that one over to you if you can help us with that.
Look, I'm going to look at this from a, and I guess I better put a caveat over this. Look, this is a benchmark. This isn't gospel. It could change depending on the type of program you run. It could change on your average cycle for sales. It could change on the size of the contracts. There's heaps of things that go into this. But fundamentally, what I'm going to talk through here is what we call the top of funnel approach, or the tofu model, where we like to move people through a specific stage of the funnel, from anonymous to known to MQL to sales qualified, and then to ultimately what we would like to see is a win. So I'm going to put some numbers out there, but as I said, you can't hold it to me because every business is unique. What we like to get from an anonymous to a known conversion, and what we're seeing from our own sort of statistics and what we're seeing from, say, industry standard, is that average businesses will convert anywhere from, say, 2% of their anonymous visitors into known, whereas we're seeing the best in show guys getting up around the 4%. If we want to then go from a known conversion through to the next stage of MQL, and this is obviously very dependent on your nurture program, we're actually seeing for the average size businesses, or the average businesses out there, they're going around the 4% mark, converting from the known visitor to the MQL, whereas the best in show guys are getting anywhere up to 9%. So there's a significant difference there. Once we pass the MQL over to sales, we like to hope that at first acceptance level, we're at least getting 80 to 90% of MQLs accepted as sales accepted leads. And then anywhere from, say, around a 50 to 60%, depending on the type of business, will go from an accepted lead to a qualified lead. Throwing a lot of figures out there. It's up to the sales team now. The sales team are actually going to take over the process, and we're hoping that we've given them such a qualified lead at this point in time that it's actually down to not messing it up more than actually having to sell. But we're seeing the stats say that average businesses out there are converting 20% of their SQLs, while you'll find that the best in show guys are getting anywhere to 30%. All right, so what does all that mean? So we sort of say, well, for the best in show guys, we like to think that 1 out of 100 contracts will convert to a win, whereas we look at, say, for the average guys, it's anywhere from, say, 1 up to every 200 contacts. But as I said, these are just benchmarks. It's not gospel, and each individual business is different. So there are the numbers, Andrew.
So hopefully everybody wrote down those numbers, but obviously there's a lot of caveats around that. The quality of your database, the quality of your content, the offers that you make. But it's there is some information out there around benchmarks in B2B. Through our experience, there's not a lot. So a fair bit of those decisions around what you can really achieve is going to come from your own experience, and we'd encourage you to network in with your peers and talk to other organisations that are actually spending time on this. We're one of those. I've got a question from the audience from Michael here, which is around how to improve. How can we improve the quality of conversion and response? And we've been generally talking about that, but I'm going to throw this one across to Craig, if you wouldn't mind giving us a go.
No problem. Look, what it comes down to is quality of content. Quality of content that engages the user. Now, if you're able to put high quality content up that then gives someone the experience of the product or the service or the solution they're intending to buy, then what you end up with is a highly qualified marketing creative lead. And we are actively trying to do that at IBM. It's hard work. It's the difficult challenge for any unit or any business is to come up with that experience that gives a user what it is they're going to get when they buy. And I'll give an example. In China, we saw that we had a lack of the ability to show our clients how to buy our consulting services. So we took a look at what consulting is. Consulting is giving advice. Consulting is allowing people to understand their business. We put that as a virtual experience now by a benchmarking study, an interactive study we put online around a particular service area that we have. And we started asking clients and prospects to fill that in. And we give them back a benchmark study based upon comparisons around the world. It has a high value exchange, obviously, so we can gate it, as I talked about before. The beauty of this is that once we get that gated response through, it's highly qualified. It has the prospect's information, not just around who they are, but what their business pains are. We then pass that through to sales. That's an incredibly powerful tool. And without even launching this product, we've seen a lead come straight through. Someone found it incidentally while we put the beta test up and saw the assessment, did the assessment, called one of our reps, and they flew down to Guangdong to have a discussion about it. So these types of assessments that are highly compelling, have the content that is co-developed with a consulting group, have the ability to generate really high quality leads straight in the funnel.
Thank you very much today for coming along. So look, I particularly want to thank the guys, Craig, Phil and Ben, for their insights. I will just now put up a slide that's got a couple of things. Firstly, it's got a link to the research report that I talked about a little bit earlier, from our site there at www.green-hat.com.au/B2B-2015. So you can get a hold of that report. We will be doing the 2016, gathering information for that later this year. So hopefully you'll be part of that. There's also an email address there. Please shoot it across to me if you've got any feedback on topics you would like to hear about moving forward, or if any of those questions that we haven't got to, we'll get back to you and hopefully be able to answer those to you outside of this forum. So I hope you've enjoyed the session. B2B marketing is a challenging area, as all marketing associated with digital and the internet today, but it's exciting and full of possibilities. So enjoy your marketing time, and thanks for spending time with us today.